What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Gamecite Chronicles, the console game podcast where we sit down each and every week to talk about video games. I'm your host, Bonfire, and this is episode number 39. Hope you guys are all doing well out there. Had a fantastic week, had a even better weekend, and you can probably tell by the sound of my voice that I'm not 100%. And I got to be honest, it's been a little bit of a rough week for me as I came overcome with some sort of sickness. I don't think it was the Modelo virus, but I think it was like a sinus infection. And it started last weekend with a little bit of a sore throat, and I was like, no big deal. I'll get over it pretty quick. That's fine. And then I felt pretty good on Monday, and then all of a sudden Monday night, I lost my voice and was super congested. Woke up the next day, I could only whisper. I couldn't talk really. It was weird. Never had anything like that happen before. And so I've kind of been dealing with that. A lot of congestion, a lot of sinus stuff. I haven't really been able to talk. And so I was like, oh shoot, am I going to be able to record the podcast this week? But thankfully, I was kind of been on the up and up, starting yesterday. So I'm recording Saturday evening, late Saturday. And yesterday I started feeling pretty, a lot better. Woke up this morning feeling the best I've felt in probably a week. So we're gonna make it through this episode. I will say the one thing that's the most annoying about this sickness I've had is throughout the day, I am good. You'll clear your throat. You got a little congestion, no big deal. But I don't know what it is at nighttime. Every night for the last 4 nights, this cough comes. There's this little tickle in the back of my throat, and I cannot stop coughing. And it is so annoying. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but let me tell you, it is not fun. But that's just the week I've kind of had. But this is a video game podcast, and we're here to sit down and talk about some video games. And there's some fun topics to talk about this week, so I'm excited to dive into it. And probably the biggest and most exciting thing is that God of War Ragnarok is officially out. It's here. Everyone's playing it. A lot of people have already beat it. I've started it, so I'll share some of my early thoughts on the game a little bit later. But for those that are new to the show, remember the best way to support the show is to leave us a rating on the podcast platform you're listening on. You could also listen to the show on YouTube or Rumble, and I'd appreciate if you guys would subscribe over there. I'm looking to try to boost my subscriber numbers over there, as well as on Rumble too. Rumble's a pretty cool platform that I've really been digging here lately. It's a nice YouTube alternative, so check me out there if you're so inclined. You can also follow me on Twitter at Gamecite Podcast, and remember to catch new episodes of the show each and every week on Mondays, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Now, before we get into anything, I wanted to start at the top of the show with a write-in by our buddy Xerxes, who wrote in and said, I never saw myself as someone who would want an Xbox, but with Game Pass, it's making me rethink it all. Plus, the social media posts they have are really fun and consumer-focused. And man, Xerxes, I love that term. So consumer-friendly. I just, the context that term is used really drives me nuts, because really it just means you want free shit. But that's not what you're saying here. And I actually think you bring up a really interesting point about Xbox and their perception to consumers. You talk about their social media posts. They're really fun, and that's appealing. I think they are really fun. They have a lot of consumer goodwill that they've built up over the last, several years. And they kind of portray themselves in some really fun light. They're lighthearted, I guess, as a company and a brand. And I think that really goes a long ways with customers, especially young customers, where the whole point of the product is to have fun, right? And they really lean into that, I think, pretty well. Whereas PlayStation used to, and in the PlayStation 3, well, I say all of the PlayStation 3 into the PlayStation 4, they really were a much more fun company doing a lot more, I guess, as you would say, consumer-friendly things. I think about the PlayStation experience that they used to do. They had a big focus on indies. Some of their advertising was just fantastic. And, even earlier in like the PlayStation 3 era, I think, they had some just some really fun commercials. They had like personalities, even personalities in the company too. Like I think he was a former CEO of PlayStation, Sean Layden. That guy was great. In just some really good personalities, and just I think there was a lot of fun that came with it. And this was kind of during the like peak E3 era. We'd get the personalities come on, and you'd get the showcase. Everything was like I don't know. I just think about that era and like how it's totally different now. It's very business focused, which they are a business. I get it. It's corporate, but I think there's something to be said when you talk about the customer experience and you talk about some of the intangibles. Intangibles meaning like you can't really put a dollar value on some of these experience type things because they generate goodwill, good word of mouth, and keep your customers loyal to your brand. I think it increases loyalty. And so I think that's something that PlayStation's missing. Nintendo has it. I mean, Nintendo fans, and I put myself in this category, they've got their hooks in people, myself included. So, they do a lot of great things in there, a lot of fun stuff on the Nintendo side. Obviously, a lot of that stuff too is aimed at kids or younger folks. So I think PlayStation needs to step their game up in that regard. So that's I wanted to bring that up at the top because that kind of got me thinking about it. And I think it's a really interesting point that you bring up, Xerxes. So thank you so much for writing in. I appreciate the thought. And, I got to be honest, Game Pass there's a lot of value there, especially if you haven't played a lot of those Xbox titles. And I think going into next year when they're going to start really bringing a lot of day-and-date games, like I know Life of Pi. I think it's Life of Pi. That Pinocchio game. That's the one I'm thinking of. That one's coming day and date. Atomic Heart's coming day and date. Obviously Starfield, Redfall, which I'm so looking forward to, is coming out day and date as an Xbox exclusive. And there are a bunch of other ones as well. So dive into it. Give it a go, man. I mean, worst case, they've got really good deals to sign up for like 3 months or something like that. Give it a try. See if you like it. And if it's worth it. So I'll leave it at that. So for this week's show, a couple things I wanted to dive into. And I'll be candid, with me being sick, I didn't really get to do the deep dive on the topic I wanted to discuss. So again, we'll catalog that. We'll come back to it another time. But with some of the news stories that came out that I found interesting, especially regarding PlayStation, Horizon, and mobile games, I figured let's dive into that and this desire for PlayStation to get into this space. There's also a couple other really interesting news stories I want to touch on this week. Control 2 was officially confirmed, so I think that's really exciting. Netflix announced 2 Gears of War projects, and Call of Duty will have a full premium release in 2023. So we'll touch on that and dive into it. But before we get into that, we got to talk about the games that we're playing. And as always, remember to write in to let me know what games you're playing so we can get them onto the show. And one thing I forgot to mention about last week about the game I'd finished, Signalis, is that game requires note taking. I really wanted to. I've totally forgot to mention this because I find this a really fascinating point about that game. So I pretty much had a full page of notes, like in like a small notebook, but a full page of notes in terms of like different puzzles, writing stuff down that I'd find, or different passcodes and stuff that you had to kind of pick up. And I wrote those down so I could go and solve those puzzles. And I feel like this game requires it. It's in a very old school in that fashion. And it's actually something I really liked about it because it doesn't hold your hand in regards to puzzle solving. It was very classic. So I wanted to call that out because I totally forgot to mention that last week when I was talking about Signalis. So keep that in mind if you decide to dive into that game. And like I said, I do recommend that game. I really enjoyed my time with it. I really hope we get more kind of PS1 era style games because that one was such a tribute to the classic Resident Evil and Silent Hill games. But for the games that I've been playing, I started Bayonetta 3 last week, and I managed to beat this game before, right as before God of War came out. It took me about I think just a little over 17 hours or so. And this game is pretty darn good, I have to say. I enjoyed most of my time with it. The combat is absolutely stellar, which you kind of expect if you've played the first two Bayonetta games. It's very much that, but they add in some new elements, some new mechanics that I think are a ton of fun to work with. And one of the things I really liked about it is there's lots of different weapons that you kind of accumulate throughout your playthrough and new demons to play as that really adds to a lot of variety in the combat and a lot of cool and new things to experiment with. And like once I found that my weapon of choice, that's what I kind of spent my time doing. I've dabbled in a couple other weapons, but this is the one that just worked for me in kind of my play style. And so like once you kind of find that in, dial it in, and then start to kind of just get into a flow. Like there were a couple different battles and combat situations I got into it. Like you just get into this flow. Like you're dodging the attacks, activating the witch time, kind of slowing things down, getting in your combos, dodging everything, dodging perfectly, setting up another combo, summoning your demon to get some big attacks in. Like it's just once you kind of get into that flow state, it's just so good and so satisfying. Like, man, this combat is so damn good. And there's also some really epic boss battles and different kind of sequences that you go through in the various levels that I absolutely loved. And the final boss battle before you get to the credits is so good. Like just so awesome. Like they did a really great job with this game. Kind of as expected. Again, if you've played the other Bayonetta games, you'd kind of expect that, but I think they kept up with those first two games in a great way. And one of the other things that I really liked about this game is there's a couple of side missions throughout the story that you play through as the Jean character, which if you played Bayonetta 2, you know who that is. And it's kind of a 2D stealth game. Like it takes the Bayonetta formula in the combat, but puts it into this very fast-paced 2D setting, which kind of reminded me of Shadow Complex in a way. It's not like a Metroidvania at all. They're very small levels that you play through. But you try to sneak around, you take enemies out quickly, and you kind of go through these levels, and it's awesome. And there's a couple of boss battles in these side missions that are really fun. You get some cool weapons, and I just thought it was really great and really impressive to kind of take the Bayonetta formula, flip it on its head a little bit, and kind of introduce this new way to play Bayonetta and set up this kind of side story. I thought it was really awesome and very well done. But I do have a couple of criticisms about this game. Kind of two main ones really to point out. So first is there's a character, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but there is a character that you do play as that's newly introduced. You play several parts as this character, and I'm just not a fan of this character. The style of combat is a little different than Bayonetta, and maybe I'm not good enough as that character, but I just didn't like it. Because the whole point with Bayonetta, and when you activate Witch Time, which like slows things down, lets you get in combos, is you dodge attacks, right? If you time your dodge perfectly, you don't get hit, and then you activate Witch Time, and you kind of can get into this flow state by kind of dodging attacks and then getting in your hits. Whereas this new character, you have to parry or block. And it just, I don't know, I'm so used to kind of moving my character around and dodging attacks that I'm always kind of moving around, and when you have to parry the attacks, you kind of have to sit there and wait for the attack to almost hit you and then, block it. So it was almost the opposite of how I'm used to playing Bayonetta, that I could not get it down, and I found it very, very frustrating. So I didn't like that character and the combat style. And there are a few post-credit sections in scenes. That's not a spoiler. If you beat the game, you'll get there. That kind of sets up the future of the series, and I'll be honest, I'm not really keen on that direction. So I'll leave it at that. Again, I don't want to spoil anything for anyone who hasn't played it or wants to. But I will say that this is a classic example of a character that is made for a, quote, modern audience, that also includes some bad writing and dialogue. So I didn't really enjoy that part of it. The other thing is I felt like there were some middle parts of this game that were a little too formulaic. So like once you kind of get through the first area, like not really the first area, but like the first couple of missions, and kind of get the first object that you're looking for, you kind of repeat that formula a couple times as you kind of go through the game. Obviously, the story progresses and you're kind of learning new things and like that, but I just felt there were certain parts of the game in the middle that were very formulaic, very kind of predictable and repetitive. And I was just like, I don't know. It kind of got almost stale until I reached kind of the end game, towards the end, the peak of the story. And I was like, okay, I'm back in. So they almost lost me in the middle of the game. And so I think Bayonetta 2 is a better game, but this is still a very solid game. I have to say, a very solid game. I wouldn't be surprised if it does get some Game of the Year nominations, just because the combat is so good and it's really fun to play when you're just flowing through combat, taking down bosses. It's really, really fun in that regard. Like, it makes other games' combat look kind of shitty. I gotta be honest. Also, the music is phenomenal. Like some of the set pieces, it's also, I love the campiness of it, as I mentioned last week, and it all that the package just fits together really, really well, I have to say. So Bayonetta 3, great game. I don't think it's as good as Bayonetta 2, but I would still definitely recommend, especially if you played the first two games. Like, you got to play this game for sure. Another game I've been playing kind of on the side, a little bit in bed, on my Vita, believe it or not, my PlayStation Vita. Yes, I still have it, and decided to boot it up and boot this game up. And that's Super Stardust Delta. So this is a game from Housemarque, the new studio, not the newest acquired studio, but the studio behind the most recent Returnal game, which is fantastic. And it came out in 2012. And it's basically a arcade shooter, like a little space shooter, where you're shooting asteroids, different enemy types, so different robots, and you go through various kind of stages, very arcade mode. It's very similar to Resogun, and it's a game out before Resogun. And in playing this game, it's like, oh, okay, I can see how they went from Super Stardust to Resogun. The formula is very, very similar. I think Resogun's better. Resogun is like, if you've never played Resogun, you have to go play that game. That is one of the best PlayStation 4 games that have come out. It's definitely in the top 25, for sure. It's amazing. I love and adore that game. But this game is awesome as well. I've only played it for like an hour and a half. I've beat the game though. It's it's an arcade game, so it's not very long. I beat it on casual because I'm not good at this game. It is kind of difficult. I have to say that. But I've replayed a few levels, and I tried out one of the other game modes, which uses the Vita touchscreens to like blow up asteroids and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool, and it's one thing I don't like about it though, like it uses the Vita touchscreen. So to use your specials, you got to actually touch the screen, and then you can actually, kind of like the Nintendo Switch with the tilt axis for aiming and stuff like that. They have that to where you can kind of move the screen and tilt your viewpoint a little bit. And I don't really enjoy touch controls. Like, I get at that time with the Vita how exciting that was, but I'm not really feeling that. And I don't know. I actually didn't look, but I don't know if there's a way to turn it off. But either way, this game is really fun. Really, I picked it up because I got my Vita out and I was like, oh man, what games do I have on here? I kind of feel like playing the Vita. And I thought I had a digital copy of the Uncharted game, and I was like, that sounds perfect. Like, I'd love to just play that. I've always wanted to play that game. Never played it. I don't. But I do have the physical copy, so I may buzz into that. And so I was like, what other good games are on Vita? And I remember Colin Moriarty from Sacred Symbols always talking about Super Stardust being one of the best games on Vita. So I dove into it. I have to say, it's fun. It's really, really fun. It's a fun arcade game to just kind of jump into, play a little bit, hop back out, that type of thing. And man, Housemarque, they make great games. like genuinely great games. I'm excited to see what they do next after Returnal. I have to say, because like to think that they went from Super Stardust, this very simplistic arcade game that's a ton of fun, to Returnal is insane. And it's crazy because you can see the DNA throughout all their games. There's this core tendency in terms of replayability, of fast-paced combat, arcade-like, high scores. Like, it's all there. It's so awesome. So awesome to see that. So there's that. And then lastly, of course, I jumped into God of War Ragnarok on the PlayStation 5. Now, I've only played about 3.5 hours. I just started this game. I have to say, the opening scene is fucking awesome. Oh my God, it's so good. So good. And there's a little section in the opening part that, I'll be honest, again, not spoiling anything, but I got a little emotional. It hit a little too close to home for me. And it's interesting too because as I'm playing through this game, I'm a father now. So, and when I played the first one, I wasn't a father. But now being a father, it just hits different. Like the father-son dynamic just kind of hits different for me. Like actually having that in my own personal life. So I have a feeling this game's going to hit pretty hard for me. But it's such a high-quality game. Like from the opening moments, just even that first moment when you see Sony Interactive Entertainment, I think that's pretty sure that's what it says. But like just anytime you see that, you just know it's high quality. You can just tell, and this is a high quality game. And I'm not gonna say this just to shit on Xbox, because I do play Xbox. I enjoy Xbox games. I'm excited to see what they bring out from the first party lineup, of course. But like in playing this game, like Xbox just doesn't have this level of quality in their games. I mean, even looking at Horizon, like that game is just so high quality. And I don't play anything like that over on the Xbox. I'm sorry, I don't. I'm not saying Xbox doesn't have good games. They've got some good games on there. And some games that I've preferred to play on my Xbox. But nothing to this quality. Nothing. I just got to get that out there. But the interesting thing I'll say, because from what I've played so far, it's very much a lot of the same from God of War. Improvements here and there. Looks beautiful. Great music. Great soundtrack from what I can tell so far. Smooth. I only encountered one bug, actually, and it was doing a mission. Like, I went into this room where I was supposed to do a mission, like talk to a guy, and like just the dialogue box didn't pop up. So I had to reload my save, which wasn't a big deal because the game saves pretty often. Very minor. But the combat is still good. It's still solid. It's what you'd expect from the first God of War in 2018. But coming from Bayonetta 3 to this game, like it just really goes to, like, because the combat is good in God of War. Don't get me wrong. It's fun. It's brutal. It's gruesome. And the boss battles, because you do a very awesome boss battle in the beginning of this game, is so good. So good. But Bayonetta's combat is just so much more fluid. And God of War's combat is not as fluid as Bayonetta. So like it just for me, it goes to show just like how good of a combat system Bayonetta has. Because God of War's combat, I think, is great. Like really, really good. But Bayonetta's, there's just something special about what that game has. So it's just funny coming from Bayonetta 3, going into God of War directly, and being able to kind of compare the two combat systems. I mean, Bayonetta shines in that situation. And that's not a diss against God of War, because God of War's combat's good. So one thing I will say that I have a slight criticism, but the menu UI, so like when you press pause or go to the menu, it just seems a little crowded. There's just a lot of wording. And I remember opening, I'm like, what is all this shit? What am I looking at here? I don't understand it. And I know over time I'll get used to it, get walked through it, and be able to kind of navigate it no problem. But it just seemed like a little much at first. But I'm excited to jump back into this game, play through more of the story, and just experience this seemingly masterpiece because it's phenomenal so far. So I can't wait to get back to it for sure. So now let's jump into some of those smaller news items to touch on, starting with Control 2. So as reported by Push Square, Remedy Games officially announced they are developing Control 2 after signing a publishing agreement with 505 Games. And let's see, the article says, quote, Remedy CEO Tero Vertala said in an investment post on the developer's website, quote, I'm now proud to confirm that the bigger budget Control game, also known as codename Heron, is Control 2, a full-blown sequel to our award-winning game Control, end quote. With the first game having sold over 3 million copies, Remedy has handed a budget of approximately 50 million euro for the sequel, end quote. So that's exciting. I think this is very exciting because Control is a really good game. I don't know if you guys have played it out there, but it's really, really interesting. I loved the setting because you're basically in this corporate building, and like the building itself is kind of its own character, and the powers are fun to work with. It's fun to use the telekinesis and fly around and fight these various enemies. And it's one of those games that's just really weird and kind of makes you think. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not even going to pretend to understand the story. I don't fully understand what the hell even happened in that game, but I found it super intriguing. It was like mind-boggling, that game. And there's actually one section. It's, gosh, what do they call it? Like the Ash puzzle? Ashtray Maze is what it's called. In that section of the game was crazy cool. It's such like one of the like one of those moments in a video game you're like, yeah, this is awesome. It's definitely a standout moment in that game. And so I'm excited about this news. I find it very exciting, especially because one of the cool things they did with this is that it's in the same universe as Alan Wake, which I loved that game back on the 360. And I think they had a DLC for Control, which I didn't play, though I'd love to at some point. That kind of confirmed that, yeah, this is in the same universe as Alan Wake. All their games are taking place in the same universe. And with Alan Wake 2, I mean, maybe there's even more connections that they're building up to. So, pretty cool. I'm invested in this for sure. Now, the thing is, though, we're probably not going to see this game for at least 3 years because they just signed the deal. Maybe they're in pre-production, but we're not seeing this one for a while. But that's okay because they're also working on, Alan Wake 2, which I am so looking forward to that game. Hell yeah. I love it. I'm so glad that they're bringing Alan Wake back. And also the Max Payne 1 and 2 remake, which I had totally forgotten about, which sounds awesome because I never played Max Payne back in the day. So I would love to go back and experience those games because those were iconic games from back in the PS2 era, if I'm not mistaken. So the next story I want to touch on is for Netflix and their plans for Gears of War. So as reported by Video Games Chronicle, Netflix has announced a live-action Gears of War film and an animated series. The movie will come first, followed by the adult animated series. And they've actually partnered with the Coalition to adapt the games for film and TV. And I will say, the news of the animated series definitely excites me. Like I like the idea of an animated, like an anime style Gears of War, or you think about what Netflix has done with like the likes of Castlevania, or even the recent Cyberpunk Edge Runners anime. Do that like that style, but with Gears of War. I love that idea. I think that would work very, very well, and could be super awesome. But the live action movie, like, no. Can we can we stop turning every video game into a live action movie? Just, I wish we would have learned this lesson years ago, but we just keep on doing it. Like, and it's all because it's all Sonic's fault. You guys know that, right? It's all Sonic. Not everyone is going to have their Sonic movie. Like, Sonic is the only, like, Sonic is such a happenstance because you guys remember the first rendition of Sonic in that movie, right? It was horrendous. It was ugly as hell. And luckily they rectified it, turned that ship around, and were successful. I mean, we got a second movie and now a third, our fourth, I think, are in the works. So, like, they hit the gold mine with that one, but not everything is going to be that. I mean, you guys remember Doom with The Rock? Or I know the Resident Evil movies have their fans. Same, like, I thought the Silent Hill movie was good, but like Uncharted was entertaining. But hey, like the Halo series, I didn't watch it, but I heard about that, and that's not good. And I know there's been like a Street Fighter movie. Like, there's been tons of video game movies, and like the Mario movie, not the new animated one because that actually looks good, but the original one, like, these are not good things. And like, one of the things I think about with video game adaptations is, like, we already know what these characters look like. We know and love these characters, and I just don't think it works in live action. Again, this is most of the time. There are exceptions to the rule, but most of the time it just doesn't work. And here's what's going to happen with this Gears of War movie. I'm going to lay it out for you. Gears of War, the movie, is going to have a bunch of wrestlers because the Gears of War characters, like Marcus, Dom, they're all big ass dudes. Like, they're all meatheads, right? So we're going to get a bunch of wrestlers. So I know Dave Bautista, I think Bautista is how you say his name. He's for years said, I want to be in a Gears of War movie. So he has ties to Netflix with the Army of the Dead movie. So he's going to be in the movie. That's what's going to happen. The Rock will be in this movie because The Rock's in everything as The Rock, no matter what characters he's playing. He's just The Rock because his persona exceeds whatever character he portrays. And let's be honest, he's not really that great of an actor. Doesn't have a lot of range, I'll put it that way. And then John Cena will also be in this movie because why not? He's another famous wrestler who's a big dude that we can throw at this movie. So we're going to see Dave Bautista, The Rock, and John Cena run around with chainsaw machine guns killing dudes or killing monsters. Welcome to Gears of War. That's your movie. That does not sound interesting to me at all. And you know what? If The Rock is going to be this movie, I'm not going to watch it. I might watch it, but that is just going to be so disappointing to me. Just so disappointing, which is why, like, just do the animated series. That could be awesome. Because when you do animated series, the characters can remain how we envision them, how we know and love them. You could tell your own story, and it can be great. And with some of the animes that they're doing, like, it can be super gory. You can do things in anime that you can't do easily in a live action movie. So, I don't know. I'm just the movie, the live action film just does not jive with me. I'm sorry. It just doesn't work for me. But the anime, I'll keep my eye out for that one for sure. So next we have Call of Duty 2023 premium release. So also reported by the Video Games Chronicle, Activision confirmed that it plans to deliver a full premium release for Call of Duty in 2023. And I want to read a little bit of the article here to provide some additional context. So it says, quote, Activision is looking forward to building on its current momentum in 2023 with plans for next year, including the most robust Call of Duty live operations to date, the next full premium release in the blockbuster annual series, and even more engaging free-to-play experiences across platforms, it said. It's unclear what form the premium release will take, but Bloomberg previously claimed that Activision had chosen to hold back the next mainline entry in Call of Duty series, which is expected to be developed by Black Ops Studios' Treyarch, essentially skipping a release for the first time in 2 decades. End quote. So then there's an update in this article from, of course, Jason Schreier, who says in his tweets, quote, "Let me make this super clear. The next game by Treyarch is coming out in 2024. Next year, there will be a Modern Warfare 2 premium paid expansion by Sledgehammer. It's supposed to have lots of content. Maybe that's why they call it a full release, but it's more Modern Warfare 2. And that's what I think is really, really interesting. So we're going to get Modern Warfare 2 content and probably Warzone 2.0 content. So like, kind of makes me think, like, and I used to be a big Call of Duty guy. I'm not anymore, though the series keeps calling me back. Like, I really want to try these Modern Warfare games out. But let's speculate. What could be in this next expansion? And I think the obvious thing is zombies. I think they're going to bring a form of zombies into Modern Warfare 2. Have it be a standalone content piece that people can buy, because that's a super popular game mode. Like, there are some people out there that just play zombies. Like, that's all they do. And they don't really touch the multiplayer. They don't really touch the campaign. They just play the zombies. That's what they love to do. They do that with their friends. And it just seems like a no-brainer. Because if I'm not mistaken, Modern Warfare 2 does not have zombies. So this allows them to bring this game mode to the game as a premium expansion. Maybe with some other stuff too, like maybe a new suite of multiplayer, such as like a slew of new maps, weapons, gear, almost like a brand new multiplayer component. So you got your zombies, a brand new multiplayer component for Modern Warfare 2. I don't know. One of the things I do think would be cool is if they did a small campaign expansion, since a lot of folks seem to be really taken by this latest campaign. Again, I haven't experienced it for myself, but it seems like a lot of people really enjoyed it. But I don't know. That's kind of where my mind's at in terms of this premium release. I think it's going to be really interesting. And previously, we were always thinking, okay, Call of Duty skipping 2023. This is a huge window for developers to be able to put their game out there. So, but now they're going to have some sort of premium expansion or some sort of premium offering. And they always sell so much stuff. So like, I'm curious how well it's going to do and what it's going to contain. But those are my kind of thoughts. Of course, let me know what you think this premium release will include. I'd also expect a ton of updates for Warzones 1 and 2. They talked about multiple platforms, so maybe a new mobile game as well. I don't know. I really don't know, but I think zombies is a surefire bet. So now finally, let's get to that Horizon announcement, or speculation, I should say, and talk a little bit about PlayStation Mobile. So it's been reported by Push Square that there's speculation that Sony is working with NCSoft, which is a Korean company that makes mobile games, on an MMO adaptation for Horizon. And so I want to read a little bit, just a couple paragraphs of this article again to provide some context here. So over at Push Square it says, quote, "Judging by the wording in the report, it sounds like the ink is still a little wet on the steel. So if accurate, it'll be..." Let me take a step back and go up one more paragraph. Let's start over. Quote, "There's strong speculation coming out of Korea that Sony has signed a deal with developer NCSoft to create an MMO adaptation of its best-selling Horizon franchise. The studio is best known for uber-popular releases like Lineage, Guild Wars, which are big in Asia, although a report from local publication MTN claims that the company is gunning for global success here. Judging by the wording in the report, it sounds like the ink is still a little wet on the steel, so if accurate, it'll still be in the very early stages of development. Interesting, though, is PlayStation has been hiring for a Korean translator with the job location listed in Amsterdam. Horizon creator Guerrilla Games is, of course, based in the Dutch capital, so this does add weight to the report. Even more fascinating is that alongside that translator role, Sony has a handful of Amsterdam-based producer roles for an upcoming mobile game project. Given the expertise of NCSoft, PlayStation's decision to develop more mobile games, we wouldn't be surprised if this title turned out to be targeting smartphones, a little like Genshin Impact, perhaps. End quote. And that's where I think this gets interesting. So again, for some context, I looked up NCSoft and a couple of games. They made the Lineage games. It mentioned the article Guild Wars 1 and 2, which is huge. A couple of pro baseball games, a couple of Blade and Soul games, and a bunch of other basically MMORPGs is what they make. So that's what they focus on. And if this deal in this report is accurate, it's likely going to be an MMORPG that they're making. Like that seems pretty, given their track record, that seems pretty concrete there. Now, they mentioned Genshin Impact, and I think that's a really good comparison. I've not played Genshin myself, but I know it's very, very popular, especially like over in, I think, China. Tons of people play that on their phones, and I know I've also heard like the game's obviously heavily monetized, but it's not super in your face, which I think a lot of people really enjoy about it. And they say it's a ton of fun. And that also came to PlayStation 4 and 5, as you all know, and that's been a huge success on that platform. Tons of people have been playing that game. And I've said in the past before that I like the idea of a Horizon live service game, not necessarily an MMO per se, but I've talked about having like a Monster Hunter version of Horizon, because I think that just makes sense. Like you and a couple of your buddies, the village is the hub, right? You and a couple of buddies team up and you go and hunt robot dinosaurs. You collect parts and you upgrade your weapons, build armor, and then I would also love it if there's this kind of narrative thread to be throughout the game. And you go to various different environments to get to explore these environments. Maybe there's some side quests you could do. And I mean, I don't know. I just feel like it fits into that formula just perfectly. So an MMO version of that, I mean, maybe that works. I guess. That doesn't really appeal to me. And then this whole thing being on the phone, that does not appeal to me. Mostly because of touch controls. That's like one of the biggest things that's held me back from mobile gaming is touch controls. Also, a lot of mobile games tend to be garbage and just cash grabs, right? A few exceptions to that, of course. But one of the things, I know Sony recently partnered with Backbone, who they make official controller adapters that you put on your phone. And they did an official PlayStation product. And it's actually pretty cool. It's white. It's got the sacred symbols on there for the buttons. And, maybe that's the way to go. To get get something like that, like the Backbone, put on your phone. That way you have controls and you can actually, not have to deal with garbage touch controls. So there's that. I will say the one thing that's kind of held me back on that is its price point. The PlayStation Backbone's $100, and that's a little steep, in my opinion. But I've heard good things about it, and thinking about remote play, because you used to be able to remote play. You could remote play PS4 on your Vita, which is an awesome feature, by the way. Now it's done on your phone, so like maybe, and I would like to be able to do that. So maybe, I don't know. I'm kind of convincing myself that maybe I should get the Backbone and try it out. We'll see. I'll keep it in mind. But my thought process is that if Sony does this and makes this Horizon MMO for mobile phones, that they also bring it to console like Genshin Impact did. Because I think that would be the smart thing to do. Bring it to console, also bring it to PC and mobile phones, so you can tap all three of those markets and have cross-save. That to me just seems like a win situation. Now, speaking of mobile, this also kind of got me thinking about like what has Sony done in the past on mobile? Because like the article says, they want to do more in this space, as I think everyone does. I mean, it's mobile gaming makes so much money, it's not even funny. So it's no surprise that these corporations are looking at that market and being like, we got to do something here. We've got to tap this market. And so I was looking it up, and I mean, they've done some stuff in there, nothing really outstanding, I would say. So they have that Run Sackboy Run game, which I think is just a runner. They had an Uncharted game, which I think was also some sort of runner, if I'm not mistaken. they have a bunch of companion apps for different games, like MLB The Show, Gran Turismo. I think the God of War 2018 had one, Until Dawn had one, etc. And then for a while, if you remember, I think this was back in like 2016, 2017, they did PlayLink, and they had some games with that, like Hidden Agenda, That's You, Knowledge is Power. So these kind of really small titles that had companion apps that you could basically play these games with your friends. So instead of giving your friends a bunch of controllers, you do this on your phone. So like Hidden Agenda, I think was almost like kind of a choose your own adventure style game, but everyone has input into the different choices, and you play it that way. So that was a thing for a little bit. I haven't seen anything really since then. I really don't think that caught on either. But then obviously they have the remote play app that you can download on your phone. And then I think earlier this year they released a Wipeout game, Wipeout Rush, on iOS and Android. But you wouldn't know it because I don't even think they talked about it. But I did see a couple articles about that. So, they've done a little bit stuff in the space. Nothing really of significant though. You can see that they've used some of their IP, like Uncharted IP, Sackboy IP, Wipeout IP, but nothing really. Nothing really of consequence, I should say. So the idea of using one of your biggest IPs currently with Horizon, we just got a Horizon sequel. We're getting a Horizon VR game, getting a Horizon TV show, and now, an MMO. Like, they're really milking this franchise, but it's big, and I think to have that on mobile phones, I think maybe you strike gold there, but we'll see. But back to again, mobile games don't appeal to me. I don't know about you guys, but there's like I was thinking, like, what could get me to engage more into the mobile space, because it's no secret that I'm a big PlayStation fan and I like engaging in the ecosystem. And so if they're doing something in the mobile space, and it's interesting about a franchise I care about, like Horizon, maybe I at least try to engage in it. Like earlier this year, like I like Diablo, right? I tried Diablo Immortal on my iPad with a controller, and that was actually a pretty cool experience. Maybe I'll go back to it at some point, but I know what that was. That the monetization on that is just atrocious, but it seemed fairly high quality, and it was fun playing with a controller. So, maybe that's a way to go. But like, what would get me more engaged in the mobile space? And so I wrote down 3 things to answer that question. First is a cheaper official PlayStation controller for your phone. So I know that the backbone is officially certified by PlayStation, and maybe that's the answer to this. But again, $100 I feel like is a little too steep. Like, I feel like $50 would be an appropriate price point, but maybe I'm just cheap. I don't know. The second thing is trophies with account synchronization. Like, I think you should sync to your PlayStation account, and I'm surprised they haven't even done this with PC games yet, but maybe that's coming. But being able to kind of synchronize this stuff to one account, I think is critical. Nintendo should learn from that. But the last thing is cross saves. I mentioned cross save with this Horizon game. I love this idea of being able to hop on my console. If I'm going to be invested in a game like this, being able to hop on the console, play it, get to a point, and then take the game with me, or be able to like just take it to bed and play on my phone and continue right where I left off, I think is really cool. And I think this is one of the things that, when the Switch came out, made that so appealing, and to me still is to this day, because actually I did that with Bayonetta, right? I'd play on my TV for a little bit, and I was like, I'm going to go lay in bed, and I'd just bring my Switch with me. And I continue playing that. And so I just love that. It's funny because I know xCloud, like Xbox already kind of does this with xCloud and Game Pass. Like, and Jamie from Xbox Tavern talked about this, that, he likes being able to, play a game, stop it, pick it back up on his phone via xCloud, and continue his playthrough there. That's a really cool idea. And I actually would like to try that. Again, the controllers what's holding me back. So, again, convincing myself to buy this backbone. But I think that would be a really necessary component to this formula here if Sony's really going to make a splash in this space. I think crossplay is huge. And, if you're going to have an MMO type game, I said cross save, but crossplay. Crossplay is going to have to be key. Especially if you're going to offer it on console as well as phones and PC, which I think they should. You got to have crossplay. Be able to play with other people on other platforms and kind of break down those barriers. Make it as easy as possible to access and play these games, I think is important, especially when we talk about live service games. So we'll see what happens, but the initial, my gut reaction was like, oh, really? That's what you're going to do with this franchise? But I could see a possibility where this works out. Kind of if all the stars align, at least to my liking, I would dive into it. But let me know what you guys think. Would a Horizon MMO game be something you're interested in? Let me know down in the comments below. And that's all I got for you guys this week. Kind of a little bit of a shorter episode. Hopefully you bared with my terrible voice. I'm going to try to edit out all my coughs, because my raspy voice and really dry. I'm actually trying to drink a beverage to keep it lubricated, but hopefully you guys bared with me and I don't sound too terrible. But that's all I got. So again, thank you all for your love, kindness, and support of the show. Downloads are going great, and I've been thinking about some new things potentially to kind of introduce and inject into the show. And exciting is next week. We're going to record a little bit early, but next episode we should have 3 Topics Gamer on the show to talk about PlayStation. He's a big PlayStation guy, so I'm excited to bring him on. We'll talk about the state of PlayStation, get his take on it. And I think that should be a fun conversation. I'm looking forward to doing that. Hopefully you guys will enjoy it. And the last thing I ask of you is to share this podcast with your friends. Get the word out there. And also let me know any questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas right into the show. I'd love to hear from you guys. I want to try to make this as interactive as possible and inject you guys at every point that I can. Because really, without you guys, I'm just some dude talking in the microphone about video games nonstop. So I'll leave it at that. My voice is very, very tired. So thanks again. I'll talk to you guys next week. And until next time, I'm Bonfire, and I will see you online.